Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Bob, and this video I am going to talk a little bit about project management. Now, this is a video that I'm putting together last minute for the Capstone Thesis class, so it's going to be completely unedited, uncut. It's going to be great. I'm probably going to mess up so many times. But in any case, if you're going to have to do a bigger project, say like a thesis or a capstone, I hope you'll find this little bit useful. My goal here is not to teach you everything from scratch, but just to give you an overview of how the software works, because I'll provide you with a reference document, but a reference document can only do so much. It can show you some screenshots, but it's not going to show you everything in action. So that's what we're going to do really briefly in this video. So let me switch to my Canvas side here, which you should be having access to as well. And all I'm going to be talking about is going to be written out mostly in the About Project Management page. You still need to read this after watching this video. This video is mostly just to show you the software. So make sure that you read this because I don't want to turn it into a full lecture. But in general, the idea is for your project that you are going to use a couple of tools to manage it. You can do it as Scrum or Agile if you're familiar with that. I recommend to incorporate what you will find in the text here. But in general, the big things that we want is that at least you are keeping track of the different items that you need to complete and have some idea of when you're going to be able to complete those and which items are more difficult to complete than others and so forth. So first things first, you need a Kanban. So a Kanban is basically going to serve as your base backlog and an easy way to track who is doing what on your team. Now, hopefully at this point, you have used a Kanban before as a GSND student. We usually tend to use Trello, which is an online Kanban board. And this is what my sample board looks like. If you've taken a class with me, you might have seen this before. Excuse me, uncut, right? So the general idea is that you create a backlog, you have an active, category is what it's called, I believe, and you have a completed category. And that's basically it. That's the simplest Kanban that you can come up with, these three columns. The backlog is the stuff that still needs to be done. The active thing is when somebody starts doing something, you just drag it over and put it in there. And the completed one is once you've completed something, you put it in there. And eventually this list, the first list, empties up and the latter list will fill up. I also have a known issues category, which is whenever you run into some issues that need to be resolved, write it in here, make a new card for it, and just write a known issue. And you can deal with that when you have time for it. What you kind of want to do with that category is avoid that you are doing work while you should be doing the work on your backlog and that you're not prioritizing things well. Then there are the stretch goals. That's if you get an amazing idea while you're developing part of your game, or if you're, have some ideas for things in your research that you didn't originally think about, you can put it in there and you can revisit it when you have time for it. The idea is that you complete the stuff that you're supposed to be completing, not that you overscope your project as you are going along. So with all that in mind, if you know a Kanban, if you used it before, you probably have a general idea how this works. Some things that I do is like you can assign in Trello, you can assign members to it so that, I can assign stuff to Chris, Barney, and Wallace. I'm sure they'll enjoy that. That's basic Trello stuff. You can also, give it a neat little color label and things like that, and then it'll look like that. However, there are two things that I recommend in helping you be efficient about using your Trello. So if you look at the text, the three categories, it's all written up here, but then we get to using Trello efficiently. And there's a couple of things that you need to do to make sure that your Trello is being used in that manner. The first one is make sure that your tasks have the right anatomy. So make sure that when you write a task, I'm not doing a great job with that here because it's just a sample board. But, houses artwork, like what kind of houses, what kind of artwork are we looking for? Click on it, put more information in the description on what you actually need and be specific about the things that you need. You can add assets, you can add links to resources that are needed. Use these cards to really flesh out the tasks that need to happen. Okay, due dates, team members, things like that. I recommend using that. Then there are two power-ups that we are going to use. The first one is called dependencies, and you can see that here, but if you want to see what that looks like in action, you click on power-up, and then you do add power-up, and then you go look for the power-ups here. I've already have them enabled, so you would basically just look for card size by screen full and dependencies graph. The one that I'm going to explain now is called the dependencies graph. Once you add that power up by looking for it here, so you can just click on add once you find it, you don't have to add the card QR code. That's going to be useless, probably. But once you've added that, you'll have settings that you can edit here. Make sure to look into that. So stuff that I've been doing is like, okay, a backlog is stuff that's to do. Active is in progress, completed is done, so that it matches the things that the software is expecting. And then the dependencies graph, when you click on it, it will look like this. And all your cards will pop up in here. And what you can do then is, if I am clicking with the left mouse, I can move this around. Middle mouse scrolls in and out. You can also do that here. And then you can start drawing arrows between things. So when you click on something, you'll just move it around. But if you, if you hold down the control button on your keyboard, sorry, the shift button. So if you hold down the shift button on your keyboard, you can connect different items to one another, and you'll see that it updates itself. Control Z doesn't seem to work. I mean, this is a free feature, so be careful with it. Like if you want to get rid of something, you'll have to delete it again. But this is how you can manage your dependencies. And the idea is that the arrow goes from something that has to happen first before the next thing can happen. So for instance, writing a concept document needs to happen before we can design the menu for start and quit in this game. So what you do is you draw an arrow from writing the concept document to the menu for start and quit. Same way, to do the player character movement, we need to have the art for our character. So those are connected up as well. To have a camera that follows a player, we need to have a player in the game. So there's an arrow going from making the character to having the camera follow it. And that's how dependencies work. Why would you do this? Because this gives you an idea of where your bottlenecks are going to be. So for instance, if I click on any of these, let's maybe click, well actually, let's make it easier. I think you can, if I remember correctly, you can just double click them and then they'll open up the card in Trello. So as you can see here, camera that follows the player. So this is inactive, so it's this one actually. It's blocked by player character movement controls. So this is already completed, so that means it's going to be in this list. And that's why you had to do those settings up here, by the way. Whoops. Under power-ups. This is where, edit power-up settings, this is where you tell the software which is to do, which is in progress, and which is done. But yeah, if I click on this, I can see that this would be blocked. So if this is not completed, that's going to be a problem. And you complete it by just moving it along. So that is how you do your dependencies, basically. You can play around with it a little bit, but the general idea is that you put these things connected to each other, and then when I click on anything, I can be like, okay, to implement jumping, I need my tile-based height system. That's still in backlog. I need my player character movement controls, but that's already completed. There's also, it's blocking level 1. So level 1 in this case means the actual first level design. This is a very broad backlog, I guess, very broad task. So, you know, level 1 in this case is literally designing the level. And yeah, to design the level, I need to have my character movement and my height system implement, or at least, you know, for this project, that's what the design team decided. So this needs to be completed to complete that one. And if we click on level 1 in here, you'll see that it mimics the block by thing, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done before we can do level 1. So that's one thing for you to get a better hold of your project. This will show you where your bottlenecks are, and when somebody needs to work on something, they're like, oh shoot, I need information from this or that. So that's something that you want to use. The second one is card size. Now, before I explain card size, I want to pull this up real briefly. So card sizes relate to story points. And if you're not familiar with Agile or Scrum, story points are a system to basically see how much work a task is going to be. This is important because, you know, it's all nice to assign tasks to people, but if you're just going to dump random tasks on people, it's going to be really difficult to get an idea of when these things can actually going to be completed, or how they relate to each other as well. Like if something is blocked by the dependency by a task that is really, really big in scope, you probably want to know this as well. So to figure that out, development teams use story points. And card size is what it's called in that Trello power-up. And you can do this in many ways. Like some people are just like, we're using hours, and we're going to say like, okay, when we go to Trello, let's close this again. When we go to Trello, making a pathway artwork is going to be an hour of work. Other people are going to be like, well, that's going to be a large task. On the other hand, the ground tile artwork, that could be 2 hours of work. That could be an extra large task. So that's a way to just get some idea of how things relate to each other. And you need to get a feel for that. Like, it's not something that you build up experience, and the better you become as a developer, the better you'll be able to estimate this. But the way that I recommend that you do this, and that I do this myself, is using the Fibonacci sequence. So if you're not familiar with Fibonacci, it's a sequence in which a row of numbers will grow by adding the previous number to the next number. So it basically goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. So 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13, and so on. Why would you use the Fibonacci sequence? Well, it's because it's easy to add these things up. Like, if you have a 13, you can divide it in an 8 and a 5 if you start splitting things up. So you can also just say, like, I'm going to do a 3, a 5, and a 3. And eventually you can always narrow it down to the smallest denominator. So it's an easy system. I recommend using this. And you can use the following rubric in the text. I'll make it a little bit bigger to see. There we go. So to assign story points to your tasks. So 1 story point means less than 2 hours and no dependencies, and everything is known to completed, while 13 story points is like a full week of work or more than a full week of work. And you don't know what the dependencies are, for instance, and you might need to learn new stuff. So, and one thing I recommend, as you can see here, is split your tasks into smaller tasks once you hit an 8. So with that in mind, let's look at what that looks like in practice. So in the card size power up by Screenful, you can see how these things are added up per user. But if you click on an assignment once you enable this, you can assign a size to one of the tasks. You can track of what has been spent, and you can track what is still remaining. And to change these numbers up here, all you have to do is click on the card size power up here, and you can change the size here. And as you can see, I've been using Fibonacci. So let's say if we want the pathway artwork to actually be a 3 instead of a 2, I can click on that number and I will update it. If this has gone into active, so let's say I have started work on this, I could be in here, and then I could click here and I could say, like, okay, I've done about 1 out of 3. I've done 30% of the work, and that will update it as well. Sorry, I have to click the button, obviously. So I have to click on save. There we go. And that way you can see the progress that you are making and the extent to which tasks are being completed. All right, so that is Trello in a little bit more of an advanced way if you haven't used that before. And that is the basic of your project management. This is how you do your backlog and how you assign things to people. And you can even add due dates to it if that is an important thing for you to do. So you can go to the dates and add a due date for people on this as well. However, we do need a little bit more to get a general idea, because, like, this is great. You'll know what is done, how much work it's going to be, who is going to do it. But it's still going to be very difficult to figure out when your project is going to be done and if you're going to end on time. So to do that, there are other power-ups that you can use in Trello, but I didn't find any of them to be as intuitive as I liked. So we're going to make a spreadsheet for that. Sorry, this is how it's going to be. Honestly, I like the spreadsheet. Most of my students in the past have preferred the spreadsheet over the Trello power-ups as well. If you want to use other software for this, you're welcome to do it, but I swear by the spreadsheet. If you go to files, you'll find it here. It's called Velocity Tracker and Burndown Chart. You're going to have to make some edits to it, but this will give you a really good example of how it works. So I already opened this up and scrolled down. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like. And this is for a capstone with, I think, 17 members or something. Jen, Dakota Patel, Sarah, Antoine, Salem, and Genesis. So these are the team members. And you can see them go week by week. So what you basically would do is, you want to clean this out, but I felt like it was a better idea to give you an example than just an empty one. On a week by week basis, the project manager of the team will copy this and we'll just move this around. And this way they're keeping track of everything that has happened every week. So as you can see here, for instance, Chen, in the week from October 1st to October 8th, so this was the fall project, has completed a velocity of 8. So velocity in this context means the amount of story points that they've done. Sarah here, for instance, did 21 story points in her first week. Sarah was very active, and Sarah might have done, I don't know, a couple of 5s, and well, I'm gonna have to do math if I'm not careful here, and I don't really want to. But they've done a bunch of tasks, and together those points were 21. Let's say she did a an 8, a 5, an 8, a 3, and a 2. I think that's 21. Don't quote me on it. So by doing that, the project manager at the end of the week, at the end of the sprint really, but that's lingo that I haven't really used yet, writes down what everybody has done. They calculate the total. So if you're not familiar with Excel, you can just use is equal to sum, and then you select this column, and then they turn into a graph, and you can see here what everybody has been doing and who has done more work than other people. One quick note with that though, never ever, because this is the big pitfall that you can do here, never ever ever give anybody a hard time because they didn't do as much as somebody else did. This is not a competition, you're a team here. The second you start doing that, you're the worst team member in the entire world, and I'll promise you, you'll get your comeuppance at some point, because if you're going to work in a game development studio, there are going to be people who at some point are going to work harder than you do, or are just more skilled at something than you do. Not everybody can be a superstar, but sometimes life also happens. Like in this case, there was sickness. For Salem was sick this week and didn't do anything. And Genesis, I don't remember what extended item means, but there's reasons, and in the notes you write why things are the way they are. So you can see this for every week, and you can see here Genesis really picked up. And there's a very good track of who did what in any given time period. So we're going to want to see this for every week. And once you get that, it gets even better. You can calculate that. You can take that number again, use Excel, don't copy stuff, use the formulas, use sum to calculate things if you're not familiar with it, and it's equal to, so you can just write in Excel is equal to, can't believe I'm explaining this, but you never know what people know and what they don't know. So, is equal to a number here, and that will copy the number over. Okay, so you only have to edit it in one spot. But all the numbers are copied over here in the total team velocity. There are some notes here as well to make things helpful. And then everything is tracked in a big chart. So that's already super helpful. And here you can see things when things aren't going really well. For instance, down here, spring break. Nothing was done, 0 velocity. And that's good to know. And this helps you to communicate with your professors as well, and to show you like, look, this is where we are. These are the challenges that we are facing. You can also see if all of a sudden the velocity is really, really high. You can also tell your professor like, look, we're running at a velocity of 120 points for 3 weeks. We need to drop our velocity because this is not sustainable, right? So this can already help you in your communication to set expectations and to readjust your scope before actual problems really happen. However, it really becomes awesome when you go to the next step, which is called a burn down chart. And it's a tiny, tiny chart in this spreadsheet, but this is the best one of them all. What is a burn down chart? A burn down chart will take the amount of story points you've been doing, the velocity, so the amount of story points per week is called the velocity again, and it will put them in their own chart. So what you do at the beginning of the semester, and this is what I'm expecting you all to do by next week, is you got 15 weeks, not 13. You got 15 weeks. Put everything on Trello, calculate the story points that you have to finish your project, and put that in a column like this one with your ideal schedule. So that's what the team did here as well. They calculated all the story points from their Trello, and they ended up with 802 story points that they needed to complete by the end of the semester. So that's a lot. And then they're like, okay, we are planning to do this many story points on a weekly basis. And, they were kind of estimating we're going to do 62. You can see it in here. It's a sum minus 62. Oh, no, wait. That is completely wrong, I think. I don't know. I'm confused for a second. But this is just strange. Oh, I see what they did there. Yeah, anyways, that's not relevant. But I think they're estimating 62 story points that they're doing per week. And so when they're doing that, they end up with 0 story points left to do with a completed project by the end of week 14, basically. This is not a good way of doing it, I would say. My recommendation is for Capstone and Thesis, by week 13, you really want to wrap things up. You want to get towards the end of it, or I think week 14, we can pull up the schedule for a second here. So let me maybe do that really quickly. So let's go here. Let's go to the class schedule. And I think milestone 4 is the one where you kind of want to have your backlog completed. So yeah, here you want to have a content complete game. You want to be in beta, and you want to have the full draft of your paper or thesis. So that's week 13, April 2nd, April 3rd. So what you want to do in your burn down chart is you want to have a couple of weeks where you hit 0 in your ideal before the end of it. And then what you're going to do on a weekly basis is you're going to just grab the velocity and subtract it every week. And you're going to see where you end up. And for this team, immediately once you get a little bit used to a burn down chart, you can see what that looks like. The yellow line is their ideal, so it represents this column here. And you know, it's just minus 62 every week, and by 14 they hit 0. In real life though, they didn't do 62 points in the first week. They were a little bit above, but in the second week they adjusted. So, and you can see that here, they jumped up a little bit with their actual velocity remaining, and then they got on track again. And they were doing really, really great. Except here, spring break happened, and they didn't really calculate for spring break in their ideal, so they stagnated. And then they tried to keep up again, but they slowly kept lagging behind more and more. And by the end, they still had points left to do. So once you see this happen, you can rescope your project, and you can make changes, and you can get ahead of things before you end up in a situation where your project is not meeting the requirements of a GSND worthy thesis or Capstone project. So that's a burn down chart. I'm happy to look at this next week on what this looks like for your team, and once you put this together. But that's basically the gist of it. So let me see where I put everything. Here we are again. So so this is what's called a velocity tracker. So you can see everything is written out in the text as well, with some examples and everything. You can see how they're adding notes. You can see how the burn down chart worked, and you can review everything here that I just shown you. But you know, without interactive video, I guess. So that is how you do your burn down chart and your velocity tracker. So with that, you have a Kanban to make your backlog, assign stuff to people, keep track of the points that have been done and the dependencies. Then you have a burn down chart and a velocity tracker. And then the final bit that I want you to do is that you have regular meetings with one another. Now, the good thing is in this class, there's not going to be a lot of lectures. So there are barely any lectures. There are some recaps that you can look into with the modules if you need more information. Or there's other stuff that you would like to learn about. You can let your instructors know, and we'll look into it. But in general, this is a class in which you have to demonstrate what you have learned in GSND. So it's more about applying what you know rather than learning new stuff. However, that means that there is a lot of class time that you can use to meet with your team and discuss where your project is. And one thing, the final thing that you need to do is we need you to keep track of a team log. This is very common if you are working on a group project. You need to take notes of what is said in those meetings. Now, we're keeping this fairly minimal. So what we are looking for, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I hope that didn't make anybody motion sick. What we're looking for is basically this. A Word doc or Google Doc preferably, where you just say, this is our meeting number, the date. These were the team members that were there. And then I want to see, what did you do before the meeting? What did you discuss during the meeting? And what will you be doing before the next meeting? And in that allows you to, record your discussion that can happen in here. You can list the work that has been completed up here, and you can list all the promises that you are making down there. This is really helpful to see when communication goes wrong. And it can also help you to go back on design decisions without needing a full design document, and so forth. So keep it structured. There's an example here of what that will look like, but you can look at that in your own time. And that's pretty much project management. It's a number of things that you need to keep track of. Assign it to one of your team members. But in general, it's straightforward game development. And if everybody does their part with just filling out the points and helping to put together the backlog, just one person at the end of every week needs to update the burn down chart and the velocity tracker. But this is also stuff that you can assign to multiple people. All right. And that is what I had to talk about for project management. I hope you find this helpful. And if there are any questions, I'm looking forward to discussing them with you in class. And now I'm just looking for my button to stop recording. All right.